The DJ's twang cut off, leaving the air heavy, as my brother called me a relic in front of everyone. I'm Caleb, in my 50s, a retired colonel. My old badge lay cold in my pocket, edges worn smooth. How do you stand steady when the room itself won't look at you? The coffee tasted burnt, the kind that clings bitter on the tongue when Hal clinked his glass for quiet. The Legion Hall wasn't grand fluorescent lights, buzzing paper tablecloths, crinkling cicadas drilling through the walls from the parking lot. Still, every eye turned to him. He didn't raise a toast, he raised a judgment. "You know Caleb here," he said, wagging the stem of his wine glass. "Still keeps that old uniform in his closet like it means something. Washed up relic, that's what." Laughter sputtered awkward like tires spinning on gravel. Someone coughed. Forks scraped once and then froze. Ashley smirked into her glass cheeks, too pink soaking in the spotlight. Aunt June muttered a prayer that didn't travel past her lips. I didn't move. My hand stayed on the porcelain mug in front of me, its rim already chipped coffee inside, gone cold. The weight in my chest tightened until I thought I might choke on silence. I let the moment pass. Not because it didn't sting, it landed sharp straight through skin, but because I knew if I answered, then I'd hand him the victory. My pulse thudded in my ears. The fluorescent hum above turned harsh, as if the whole room was leaning in to hear what I'd say. I said nothing. Outside, the summer air was thick asphalt, radiating heat. Cicadas buzzed so loud they drowned my thoughts. I leaned against my car, sweat dampening the back of my shirt. The smell of cut grass mixing with cigarette smoke from 2 old vets by the door. I stared past the neon beer sign flickering in the window and thought of the uniform back home still hanging where I'd left it. Untouched. Clean. Waiting. The shame pressed harder the longer I stood there. I wasn't just humiliated, I was diminished, as if all the years I'd worked, all the steadiness I'd carried, could be erased by one line from my brother. My breath hitched, and I clenched the car keys until they cut half moons into my palm. I pictured the drive out of town, headlights stretching down I-95, leaving the hall and Hal and his smirk behind. I pictured the closet door, the uniform bag inside the metal stitched on steady. The thought clung heavier than the night air. I stayed put silent under the buzzing lights, cicadas filling the emptiness Hal had left. I thought about leaving town that night, but something heavier kept me rooted. The parking lot was nearly empty when I finally let myself breathe. Heat still rose from the cracked asphalt, carrying Hal's words like steam off tar. They looped louder than the cicadas, louder than the jukebox thumping inside washed-up relic. I'd carried combat silence burial salutes, the rattling quiet of desert nights. But this silence bit deeper. It was personal. Inside, the music swelled again. Someone cheered. Through the glass, Ashley tilted her glass, high face lit with approval. I watched Hal beam at her his real Marine. My chest tightened. June found me leaning against the Malibu, her hand soft on my arm. "Don't let him decide who you are," she whispered. I nodded, but I didn't believe it. Not yet. By Monday, the weight followed me into the office. The community college was fluorescent lit and stale, the carpet carrying decades of coffee spills. I dropped my bag and felt the stairs before I saw the screen. A memo had leaked anonymous header subject line bold, "Favoritism in Facilities Department." My name glared from paragraph 2. Whispers traveled quicker than the copier warming up. Even his own brother doesn't trust him. one voice murmured in the break room. A keyboard clattered, then hushed when I stepped in. The burnt rubber smell of over-brewed coffee clung to the air. I forced a smile stirred powdered creamer, though I never used it. Ashley's post landed the same hour a photo in her camis captioned, "New Marine blood at Quantico carrying the family forward. Hearts and likes stacked quick." In the corner of my screen I saw Hal's comment, "Proud of you, kid." No mention of me. None. I scrolled the memo again. It accused me of bending rules for personal pride, of clinging to an old title. No evidence, just innuendo, but enough to stain. I closed the tab, but the words lingered heavy as Hal's toast. Past tense. That's what I was becoming. I walked the hall, footsteps dull on the linoleum. A student nodded politely, then whispered to a friend, eyes darting my way. My office felt smaller than ever, walls closing in with the click of my own keyboard. I thought about packing a box, slipping out quiet, letting the story finish without me. Instead, I stared at the blank monitor until my reflection stared back. The doubt cut sharper than any enemy's knife. If even the place I've bled for doubts me, where do I stand? The house was dark except for the blue glow of my phone screen. I sat at the kitchen table, papers stacked in tired piles. The hum of the window AC filling the silence. My thumb hovered over a name I hadn't touched in years, Samuel Ortiz. I didn't know if the number was still good. I didn't know if I even deserved to hear his voice. Still, I pressed call. 2 rings, then his gravel came through like he'd been waiting. Caleb. Didn't expect this late night. I swallowed hard. Sam, it's been a while. Too long. What's going on? I looked at the chipped mug beside me, the stale smell of coffee lingering. The words came rough. My brother, at a wedding, said I was nothing but a relic. Everyone laughed. And now there's a memo at work. Feels like I'm past tense, Sam. Ortiz was quiet a beat, just the faint scrape of his chair. Then Hal's still the same man, huh? But listen, you don't fight to win their applause. You fight clean. Not ugly. Clean, I repeated flat. My jaw clenched. Feels like no fight at all. That uniform hanging in your closet, he asked. It's not just cloth. It's proof. Every stitch is years of showing up. You don't need to flaunt it. But don't pretend it's nothing. I stared at the closed closet door down the hall, picture of the garment bag pressed behind it. Proof, he'd said. To me it felt like dead weight, a costume from a play long closed. Sam? Maybe it's petty to pull it out. Maybe they're right. Don't let a lie stand just because it's loud, Ortiz answered. His voice steadied like he was back in command. You've carried harder. You buried Marines and came home steady. You think a toast can erase that? I pressed the heel of my hand into my eyes, feeling the sting. The AC rattled on. The house smelled faintly of dust and last night's takeout. I don't know if I have the fight left. You don't need fight, Ortiz said softly. You need truth. Clean Caleb. Always clean. His words echoed after the line went quiet. I set the phone face down, the glow fading, his gravel voice still vibrating in my chest. I stared at the dark hallway again toward the closet. Proof, not vanity. Proof. His words echoed, but could I live them? Winter settled heavy on Fredericksburg, the kind that seeps through windows no matter how high the thermostat runs. The boardroom smelled of pencil shavings and old carpet glue. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, illuminating rows of stiff-backed chairs. I sat near the end of the table, files stacked square in front of me, though I knew my hands were trembling beneath the paper. Hal's voice carried even when he wasn't in the room. One member leaned back, murmuring, "Heard from your brother Caleb. Maybe it's time for new blood." Another cleared his throat, sliding his glasses down. "There's talk you're blocking progress, holding younger staff back." The words pricked sharper than the scratch of their pencils on paper. I wanted to slam my palm on the table to shout down the rumor, but I didn't. Instead, I felt the heat creep up my collar beads of sweat forming despite the cold outside. My chair creaked when I shifted. Ashley lingered in the corner, not saying much, just watching her gaze a cocktail of pride and unease. She didn't defend me. She didn't need to. Hal had already done the damage. Every nod around the table felt like a nail sealing a coffin. That night back home, I dragged the garment bag out from the closet. The zipper screeched, reluctant, and the smell of wool dust filled the room. I laid the uniform across the bed. Under the yellow lamplight seams looked frayed fabric thinned along the shoulder, where the weight of stars had once pressed. I ran my hand along the fading stitches, feeling them scratch my skin like judgment. Ortiz's voice echoed proof, not vanity, but proof can unravel. I almost stuffed the jacket into the trash bag waiting by the door. My fingers tightened on the hanger. I imagined Hal's smirk, the board's whispers, Ashley's silence. I let the jacket fall back on the bed. The sound was heavier than cloth had a right to be. I stood there in the stale air of my own bedroom, staring until the seams blurred. For the first time, I wondered if Ortiz was wrong. Maybe it was just a relic after all. If the symbol fails, what's left of me, Ain tapped steady against the office window, streaking the glass like lines of doubt. The place was empty at this hour, only the hum of the vending machine and the flicker of my monitor keeping me company. I sat hunched over the keyboard, a folder of receipts open beside me. Ashley's name appeared again and again in the travel logs, each line a small betrayal typed in bureaucratic font. The storm outside crackled with thunder rattling the blinds. I highlighted each document, attaching them to a draft email. My reflection hovered in the monitor, tired eyes, jaw tight, hands trembling over the keys. I thought of Hal, his smirk carrying into board whispers, and of Ashley smiling in her uniform at Quantico, never mentioning the lies buried in her paperwork. The cursor blinked impatient. In the silence, guilt pressed heavy. Was I punishing Ashley for Hal's cruelty? Or was I honoring the code I'd lived by, the one Ortiz reminded me of, the one my mother whispered before she died? Fight clean. My fingers hovered, backspaced, retyped. Still, the evidence stacked like bricks. I built the dossier, carefully county clerk record, notarized, scanned receipts, memo trails. Each click felt like loading another round into a chamber I wasn't sure I wanted to fire. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Truth that would burn through lies whether I wanted flames or not. When I reached the end, I set the email to schedule send. 10 minutes, no longer. The option sat there waiting for me to confirm. My heart thudded like a fist against the inside of my ribs. I clicked. The screen blinked, timer counting down in the corner. The rain outside grew harder, hammering the glass as if the world itself was bearing witness. I pushed back from the desk, staring at the sealed envelope icon glowing on screen. My hands felt suddenly empty, stripped of excuses. Once I clicked, the countdown began. The email was never supposed to see daylight until later, but word traveled quicker than fiber optic. By the time I stepped into the auditorium that spring morning, whispers already clung to the air like dust motes in the stage lights. Receipts, someone muttered behind me. Favoritism. I caught Ashley's pale face 2 rows up, eyes darting, lips pressed thin. She knew. The community college had dressed the hall for a staff town hall, but it felt more like a trial. Folding chairs squeaked as people shifted, the scent of stale popcorn drifting in from a forgotten concession stand down the hall. I took a seat near the front, feeling every eye crawl over me. Hal arrived late, of course. He strode in wearing his best smile, the kind polished for banquets, not truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, voice too loud for the cheap mic. "We've all heard things flying around, half-truths, gossip. Let's put them to bed." He turned just enough for the crowd to catch his smirk. "My brother here, he's been clinging to the past, still thinks the old uniform earns him deference. But let's be honest, he's past his prime." Laughter, low but present, rippled through the rows. My throat dried. I rose slowly, knees stiff. "That's not what this is," I managed, but the words felt thin. A blinking red light caught my eye. A reporter's phone perched on a tripod near the aisle, live-streamed the entire exchange. Comments scrolled, quick little hearts and laughing emojis glowing. External lens number 2, right there feeding off me. I tried again, voice louder this time. "The documents you've heard about, they aren't fiction. They're facts." Murmurs rose, a few heads turning toward Ashley, who shrank in her chair. Hal pounced. Facts. Or Caleb's bitterness. He's always been jealous, always tried to drag others down when the spotlight moved. Ask yourself, is this about justice, or a man who can't accept time moved on? His words cracked like a whip. The audience tilted toward him. I could feel it. A colleague shifted uncomfortably, looking away when I met her eyes. Someone coughed, laughter bubbled again. The live stream camera zoomed, framing my face under harsh fluorescence. I faltered. The air smelled of sweat and popcorn grease, heavy as judgment. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. For a breath, I saw them believing him, believing I was just a bitter relic clutching at ghosts. Losing in public cut deeper than war scars. I hadn't worn the uniform in years. The wool scratched at my neck as I buttoned the jacket, the silver insignia catching the afternoon sun through my bedroom blinds. For a moment I simply stood in the mirror, shoulders square, watching time collapse into fabric. The seams were reinforced, a tailor's quiet work undoing fray, a symbol mended like I hoped I could be. By the time I stepped into the auditorium again, the chatter dimmed. The same folding chairs groaned under the same bodies, but the silence that fell was different. Heads turned. Even the live stream phone seemed to pause mid-scroll. The smell of floor polish and sweat lingered. Ashley's eyes widened. Hal's stiffened lips thinning into a line he couldn't mask. I didn't raise my voice. I laid the folder on the podium, the papers aligned as carefully as I had lived my years. "These are the receipts," I said, tone even. Dates, signatures, entries verified by county clerk. I tapped once, the sound of paper sharp against wood. They speak for themselves. I offer them without anger, only truth. Ashley stared at the floor, knuckles white around her clutch. Hal opened his mouth, but no words came. The crowd leaned in the scrape of a chair leg loud in the stillness. Then a sound broke the wait. Ortiz rose slowly from the second row, his back straight as ever, medals gleaming. His voice carried like command across parade ground. Respect the colonel who trained me. The hall shifted. A veteran in the back pushed to his feet, saluting sharp. Another followed. Aunt June's hands clapped, first tentative, then firm. The room's swelled applause salutes a rising tide of validation. Even the press rep lowered his phone for a breath, stunned. I stood steady, the uniform's weight no longer burden, but anchor. The creak of chairs, the shine of medals under fluorescent light, the hush breaking into clamor, all of it pressed into me, not crushing, but lifting. Across the room, Hal's face told me the tide had turned, but what would remain after? The applause didn't last. By the time the chairs scraped back into neat rows and the live stream feed clicked dark, only silence remained. It was heavier than noise pressing down on me, as if to test whether the moment would hold. Ashley came to see me weeks later at Quantico. She stepped into my office with her shoulders tight, clutching a manila envelope. Her hands trembled as she set it down. I corrected the receipts, she whispered, eyes glassy. I'll take the reprimand. I don't want shortcuts anymore. I studied her face, seeing not the brash girl from the wedding, but someone smaller stripped down. I nodded. Clean Ashley. That's all it takes. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. Ortiz stopped by that same afternoon, leaning against the doorframe with his familiar gravel smile. You stood steady, he said, voice low. But remember, healing's not a single night's applause. Dignity outlasts victory, Caleb. Keep it steady. His words settled into me deeper than the roar of the crowd ever had. Later that month, I drove out to the cemetery. The sun was cool autumn leaves snapping under my boots. A folded flag rested at the base of a headstone nearby, left by another family. The air carried honeysuckle from the hedges soft against the stone silence. I stood at my mother's grave, hat in hand, and let the quiet wash over me. I told her what had happened. Hal's words. Ashley's stumble. Ortiz's reminder. The resentment I'd carried felt like a stone I could finally set down. I didn't need to win louder than Hal. I only needed to live cleaner than the lie. As I turned to leave, the wind rattled the trees, carrying her memory forward. The question lingered how to turn this into more than survival. Months later, I walked back into the auditorium that had nearly undone me. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but the air carried a different weight. Instead of whispers, there were paper flyers taped to the doors. Veterans Support Fund launch, all welcome. The edges curled in the spring humidity, but the ink was bold. Flags rustled on the stage as volunteers set up folding chairs. Aunt June moved among them with a clipboard, her glasses slipping down her nose. Ortiz stood near the back, steady as ever, nodding greetings. Ashley was there too. Sleeves rolled up, taping posters with quiet focus. She didn't look at me right away, but when she did, her nod was small and real. When the crowd settled, I stepped to the podium. The microphone squeaked once before yielding to my voice. It's not about me, I said, simply scanning faces both familiar and new. It's about us, what we carry, what we pass forward. This fund isn't a monument. It's a tool. A way for the scars we bear to build steadiness for those coming after. No thunderous applause this time, just a warm ripple of hands clapping a few voices calling assent. A handshake here, a pat on the shoulder there, the kind of response that grows roots, not fireworks. I looked out and saw Ashley directing a group of students, her voice soft but firm. A step toward repair, small but unmistakable. As the event closed, I lingered by the door. People filed past, neighbors, veterans, students. Each handshake, warm, each thanks quiet, but genuine. The smell of coffee from the concession stand mixed with the crisp air blowing in from outside. For the first time in years, I felt not just seen, but useful. I let my gaze rest on the worn flyers, the flags swaying gently, the hum of voices planning next steps. The uniform had been mended. Now the work was to mend beyond me. If you carry scars, stand in your truth. The scent of polished wood lingered on my hand after I touched the podium, the same hand that slipped my mended pocket watch back into my coat. It wasn't just keeping time anymore. It was keeping the life no one else could rewrite. I knew then that justice wasn't about one round of applause, but about how I chose to walk each day. Restoration mattered more than revenge. Even in lost jobs or family betrayals, dignity can steady a man. A short note in the town newsletter read, "Veterans Fund draws steady support." And I wonder when your turn comes, how will you tell your story